Okay, greetings, my friends. So, first things first. I've been shaving for roughly 30 years of my life. Apparently, I have not yet mastered the art of it because I cut the hell out of my lip this morning. I only bring that up because I don't want people thinking it's a sore or something of that sort, something creepy. I just cut myself shaving like an imbecile teenager. And so, that out of the way, let's get on to the important stuff. My head has been, the wheels have been turning in my head all day today. Yesterday, I made a video about a gentleman named P.D. Ouspensky, who was a student of G. Gurdjieff. G. Gurdjieff is one of the most significant mystics, I would say just one of the most significant philosophers in general, of the modern era, of recent history. And of course, this depends on how you define recent history. But Ouspensky was in Russia in 1919, and this is all recounted in the video. I'm just going to go over this real fast. Ouspensky was in Russia in 1919, which was the Russian Revolution, which was the series of events that led to the Bolsheviks gaining power, which then led to the Soviet communism and everything that came out of that, the Cold War, all of that stuff. Ouspensky was in Russia in 1919 while these events were happening. He was a man with a very unique perspective. And he wrote about this. He wrote a series of letters, and again, this is in the previous video. I'm gonna pin it in the description box for this video or audio, however you are receiving this. I publish on various platforms, and so Ouspensky had floated the idea. He wrote the assertion that what was happening in Russia was not really political. That what was happening was actually this like force, this like preternatural primeval force that had been summoned intentionally. He specifically notes Germans, which I find is interesting. Like he specifically says it's people in Germany, which makes sense if you know the situation that was going on with World War One between Russia and Germany, all those things. But just my point is, Ouspensky asserts that they had summoned this force in the Russian people, and they had set it loose as a way to basically to take down the Russian people without directly fighting them. Ouspensky asserts that this force preceded the Bolsheviks, preceded the whole Soviet era, was way longer. He talked about Pugachev, and I would presume that it even preceded Pugachev. It's just this force that lays dormant in the human psyche, this archetypal force that can be summoned at will. And so while I was doing the video, I just it was just stream of consciousness. It occurred to me. I said, if these things, these thought forms, these primeval forces, which I like to call egregores, it's not a term that I made up. But the term egregore it's a concept about a collective thought form that a series of people create when they have a shared goal, a shared interest. And this egregore, if you're a materialist, maybe the best way to think of it is just like a mass psychosis. But if you are of a non-materialist bent, such as myself, I think the egregore may be something bigger than that. I think that the entanglement of human consciousness may actually create like a different life form. Whether or not that life form can exist without the people involved, I don't know. But I think maybe I personally think that's probably how it works. But again, I'm not a materialist. I'm open. I would like to be able to talk to materialists or non-materialists about these topics because a lot of the stuff applies no matter which lens you look at it through. But so in the video, it occurred to me, if certain forces, whoever they may be, if they figured out how to summon this archetypal force, this destructive force that manifests in these various forms of socialism or communism, just various forms of totalitarian egalitarianism, if that had been mastered, it could be weaponized. And it could be used by one nation or one group to take down another nation or another group. And the force that initiates this, they might not actually have any socialist inclinations at all. They may simply summon it as a destructive force. And I was really fascinated by that, and I was thinking about it all day today. And then I thought of something I learned in a tree seminar last Saturday. I grow fruit trees, and I just love trees in general. So I went to a seminar to learn how to better grow my trees. It was an excellent seminar. The guy who put it on was very knowledgeable, and just a good dude too. And so, all right, to get to the tree part, right? I was thinking about this concept of these weaponized egregores, these weaponized thought forms, however you particularly want to frame it. And I was just thinking about how they could be used to take down a system. Because then I was thinking, like, why would you go about that, right? Because you are essentially introducing chaos into a system, which means that even if you win at the end, you're still going to have to clean up all that chaos at the end. It's a very messy way to go about things. But then I started thinking, if you have a very well established and well defined structure, right? It's hard to take it down if you are the smaller force, right? You simply don't have the resources, you don't have the size, you don't have the power. You can't take it on head. It's impossible. And so if you couldn't take it on head to head, maybe the first better stage would simply to find a way to introduce chaos in order to take the system down with the plans of swooping in and rebuilding at the end. A messy solution, but possibly the only solution if you are facing an empire of sufficient size that you could not take it down head to head, right? So a messy victory is better than no victory at all, correct? And so then I was just thinking about this, and I was thinking, well, how would this work? Because if you are creating chaos, right, and you're coming at a system, what you're basically trying to do is you're saying this system is too strong. If we meet it head to head, we can't beat it. But if you can hit it with a million, that old saying about death by a million cuts. If you could hit it by a million cuts, then the system would collapse on its own. And interestingly, the system size would become a liability, right? Once the foundations start to crack, all of that weight of the structure ceases to be a virtue and it becomes a liability. And my head just started spinning because I was thinking of accounting terms, like what's an asset versus a liability. So the structure of the size and weight of the structure ceases to become an asset and it becomes a liability, which is a very interesting concept. But then I was thinking, if you are this force of chaos, or if you're on the side of this force, how would you really go about coordinating that, right? Because there would be so much of like probing for weaknesses from all of these areas, trying to probe for weaknesses in this larger structure. I don't think it's realistic that you would be able to logistically manage all of that. It would just be too chaotic because you wouldn't really know what was going to work, what wasn't going to work. The advantage of being the smaller force against the bigger force is that the smaller force, you're more flexible and you're more lightweight. Yes, but there's a limit to that. You can only be so flexible and so lightweight. There gets a point where I don't see coordination to be logistically possible. And so I was just thinking, all right, so you have these forces of chaos. You're trying to take down this larger structure. How would you actually know what was going to work? And what I realized, I came back to this tree seminar. Because what he was talking about pruning trees and how a lot of people prune trees incorrectly. And because the reason is people often prune trees because they want to make them more wind resistant, right? The idea is if you get rid of some of the branches, you leave more space for the wind to blow through them, which theoretically would make the tree able to endure the buffeting winds better. But he said that's actually incorrect. And he said the reason that's incorrect is because that's not actually how trees blow down. Trees do not generally blow down from just standing in place and having one wind hit them like for a periodic time and then they just break under the pressure. He said what actually happens, it's the swirling action of the wind creates the canopy to oscillate back and forth, and it oscillates so fast and the limbs start rotating and bending in the wind. And it's that snapping motion that causes the branches to break and perhaps the whole tree to break. And so it's not one persistent, consistent force on the tree. It's actually the unpredictable fluctuations of the wind that create the tree, that cause the treetop to spin around until it finally breaks. I thought that was, number one, just very interesting. But number two, it occurred to me that it applies to this concept of using chaos to take down a system. Because if the structure is too big and you're trying to strategically apply force to certain areas, the structure is so big, so solid, so powerful that it can endure some of that. And it can It would be able to repel the attacks on certain parts of its foundation, strengthen the foundation, and it would be able to stop to stop this chaotic force. But what it wouldn't be able to handle, just like the treetop, is if the winds were coming from so many directions that resources were being allocated to various different directions all at the same time, chaotically trying to fix this problem, fix that problem, blah, 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 boom, 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 boom. And finally, in the chaos, the limbs start breaking, and maybe the whole trunk breaks in half. And so it like crystallized something in my mind, because I realized that if it is theoretically possible that you can manufacture and create and summon these archetypal forces, egregoric forces, that would be a feasible way to crash a large system, and perhaps maybe even the only way to crash a large system would be chaos coming from all directions, and not a system that appears to be chaos. I guess that's what I really want to get across. It wouldn't be a matter of you like coordinating a series of attacks from different directions all at the same time, with the hopes of confusing them and creating chaos, because you yourself wouldn't be able to think that fast. You would want to create actual chaos that you can't even control, right? And maybe that's how this works, because even if you look right now, I kind of feel like maybe this is actually happening around the world, that maybe this isn't theoretical or hypothetical. Maybe this system, this technology, this psychic technology actually has been mastered. And it's all of these various forces using it on their enemies and creating chaos all over the place, trying to destabilize all of these systems. And yeah, I guess that's it. It just, as I was thinking, I wish I had thought of this yesterday, because I could have added it to the video instead of just saying it now. And I'm hoping this isn't like coming too out of the blue and it's too hard to follow. I'm hoping what I'm saying makes sense, and let me know if it isn't. Maybe I need to make a video where I'm more clear about what I'm saying. But it makes sense to me, and I think I expressed it clearly. But again, honestly, if I have not, please politely let me know in the comments, and I would do a more structured video on it. I'm trying to do more videos because I don't make enough content, because this isn't my job. I don't really have time to put together really structured like scripts and everything. Like, I kind of have to speak off the cuff right now, which I don't do disrespectfully to any of you. I simply don't have time. And I started looking back and realizing I have not been making videos like consistently at all. And the reason is because I keep telling myself, take the time to make this really tightly constructed script. I don't have time for it, guys. So it's going to have to be like this for now, for a little while at least. And I hope this is not too rambling or annoying. I really do. I don't want to be one of those people. I hope these thoughts are worthwhile, and I hope I can get them across off the cuff in at least a somewhat efficient manner. But anyway, so yeah, I started thinking about that, and you know what? It makes sense. Like, it actually does make sense, and that could be why, we talk about all of these socialist uprisings that upset these systems, and the people who end up taking control never seem to actually have like real socialist ideas, like the revolutionaries do. But then the people who swoop in and take control, they don't. Maybe that's why. Maybe it's just been uncovered that it is like the optimal collective thought form, the optimal collective psychosis to take down large systems, because it creates such massive chaos. And so perhaps it's the same archetypal form that keeps being summoned and manifested for these same purposes. Very interesting thought. And while I'm on this kind of random thought experiment and just kind of talking, one other thing I wanted to share that I think is very interesting. This relates to social engineering. So I've often wondered, how is it that, like, we talk about, it looks like there are certain forces who seem to be very invested in changing cultures and changing social systems. And I've often thought, like, how would that actually be possible, though? How would you go about doing that? And I'm not talking about on the micro level. Like, I understand the micro level manipulation that goes on. But I mean on the macro level, how would you be able to see it clearly enough that you would know it was going to achieve your outcome. Like if I want to go into country X and I want to turn their culture around to be more, to social engineer their culture to be more desirable to my ends, how would I actually go about doing that? And again, not on the micro level. That's all out there. You can find all this stuff, and I will be talking more about. It's a subject I find personally interesting. But I mean on the macro level, how would you make sure that your manipulations actually took the culture in the direction that you wanted to go? And it reminded me, I was at this leadership course long time ago. It's probably like over a decade now. I was at this like corporate leadership course, and I forget why it was, but I asked the question. I think I was thinking roughly along these same lines. I didn't let anybody else know that, obviously, but I asked because the subject was, when a corporation starts to go down, when the business is rotted and corrupt and things aren't going well, how do you actually turn the corporation around? And what the instructor explained, and she was a very sharp woman. I wish I remember her name. She was a very competent person. I respect competence. She was a sharp, competent person. But anyway, and so she was talking about this book that she had read, which was written by I think it was a professor of business, but I'm not sure. But regardless, she said that the way that you change the internal culture of a business is that you look at your employees, right? And all employees, like and just about any group, they fall into a normal distribution, right? So you're gonna have in the middle. I forget exactly what the percentages were, but let's go with like 80% of the people. They're just in the middle, right? They're not particular. They don't feel particularly strong in anyone. They just kind of go with the flow, right? And this is, you can observe this. Like the vast majority of people in your life, they just go with the flow. On the other end of the spectrum, you're going to have 10% of people who are change agents. These are people who are naturally inclined towards change. They like change. They're comfortable with change, and they want to pursue change. Just as a natural part of their being. They're that kind of person. And then on the other end, you have 10% of people who are they're the types of people who dig in no matter what. They don't like to change at all. They want to keep things exactly as they are at all times. It's just personality differences. And so what she was saying was, if you want to change the culture, you ignore the 10% of the people that are entrenched, dug into the ground. They never want to change. But you also ignore the 80% in the middle, because they're just going with the flow, right? You can't really, they decide their actions based on what everyone around them is doing. What you focus on is that 10% of the change agents. You put all of your energy into getting them invested in the changes that you want to see. As they begin to move, they pull that 80% over to the right or to the left. I'm saying to the right or to the left because I'm not trying to imply any kind of partisan thing here. I'm saying, however, right now, right and left is a very distinct political connotation. That's not my point. Whatever direction you want, doesn't matter. They pull them towards the avenue of change, whatever that change might be, which will pull the 80%. And then that last 10% will eventually be forced to follow just to survive. And obviously, within that 80%, there would be a spectrum, right? Because you'd have the 80% that fall within those parameters, but you'd have some people that were a little more inclined towards change. They're not change agents, but they're a little more inclined towards change, right? So it's probably best to not think of it as perfectly static distinctions, but more just general like spectrums. And so that's how you that's how you create change within a corporation. And this has been studied. This is philosophized. This is out there, and it makes sense, right? It makes perfect rational sense. Why wouldn't that apply to nation states? Why wouldn't that apply to government bodies? Why wouldn't that apply to any organization of people? Like theoretically, as long as you could find a way to isolate who those change agents are, which now really wouldn't be that hard because we have so much data, or not us personally, but these forces out there, they have access to so much of our personal data. They know our behaviors. They know people's behaviors, and theoretically, as long as they can access that data, they would be able to determine in a greater accuracy than ever before in history who those change agents are. So you could swoop into a system, whether it be a town, a city, a nation, and if you could effectively figure out what that 10% is, and you could get them to go in the direction that you want, they are going to begin pulling the whole culture. And so it's not actually as impossible, and really maybe even not as daunting as it seems, right? Because when you think about moving an entire, say a nation, say a state, like a large body of people, when you think about that, it seems impossible because there's so many people. But when you remember that the vast majority of the people are kind of irrelevant, and not irrelevant in a personal sense, it's not like a judgment thing. They're irrelevant in the sense that they're just going to do what the crowd does. So you're actually not looking at that many people. You're looking at 10% of the people, which is doable, right? I would think it's doable. And so, I don't know. These are just interesting thoughts. Please, I mean this. When I used to put out videos more often, I used to say this, and I mean it. If these are too rambling, let me know. Please, politely, don't be a jerk about it, but just let me know, and I can try to tighten them up a little bit. But right now, this is kind of the best I have to do until I can find time to carve, until I can find a way to carve more time out for these videos. But so that's it. I hope this was worthwhile thinking. Even though it's off the cuff, I've been thinking about this all day. I didn't just jump on and start rambling. These are thoughts that I've had actually for longer than just today, but just today I've been thinking about them in a focused manner. So I hope it was worthwhile to everybody. I hope you're all doing well. Peace out.